Your wife is seeing my husband. I looked up from my coffee. A woman had slid into the booth across from me at the diner on Fax Avenue in Denver, and she said those words like she was commenting on the weather. My name is Gabriel. I was 33 years old, working as a project coordinator for Stone Pine Holdings, a commercial construction firm. I had been married to Megan for 6 years. And until that moment, I thought I was just having breakfast alone because my wife had an early meeting. The woman across from me was striking. Dark hair, sharp green eyes, and the kind of confidence that made you pay attention whether you wanted to or not. She wore a fitted gray blazer and earrings that caught the morning light. Excuse me? I managed. You're Gabriel. I'm Audrey. And your wife Megan has been sleeping with my husband, Jason, for the past 4 months. She tilted her head slightly, watching my reaction like she was studying it. I sat down my cup. The diner sounds faded. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation. All of it went quiet in my head. How do you know who I am? I followed Jason one night. Saw him meet your wife at a hotel off Spear Boulevard. I got curious, started digging, found out who she was, found out who you were. She shrugged. It wasn't hard. I sat there processing. 4 months. That was around the time Megan started working late. Around the time she stopped asking about my day, around the time I started feeling like a roommate instead of a husband. Why are you telling me this? Audrey leaned back, crossing her arms. Because I'm done pretending. Jason thinks I don't know. Your wife probably thinks you don't either. I figured you deserved the truth, same as me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend Megan, to call this woman crazy. But there was another part, a quieter part, that had been whispering doubts for weeks now, months maybe. Audrey reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She slid it across the table. On the screen was a photo. Megan and a man I didn't recognize standing close outside a parking garage. His hand was on her lower back. Her head was tilted toward him, laughing. My stomach dropped. That's Jason, Audrey said. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I pushed the phone back toward her. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Not to her specifically, maybe to myself. Audrey studied me for a moment. Then she smiled just slightly. Don't be sorry yet. The night's still young. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I met Megan when we were both 25. She worked at a marketing firm downtown, and I was just starting out at Stone Pine. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, talked for hours on a rooftop patio, and exchanged numbers before the night ended. Within a year, we were engaged. Within 2, we were married. The early years were good. We traveled when we could afford it. We talked about having kids someday. We built routines, inside jokes, a life. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. I couldn't pinpoint when exactly. Maybe it was after she got promoted and started traveling more for work. Maybe it was after I got passed over for a management position and came home frustrated more often than not. Maybe it was both. She became distant. Not cold exactly, just absent. Even when she was in the room, she wasn't really there. I asked her once if something was wrong. She said she was just stressed. I believed her because I wanted to. The late nights became more frequent. The texts she answered in the other room. The way she turned her phone face down on the counter. I noticed all of it and I explained all of it away. I tried harder. I planned dates she was too tired to go on. I bought flowers she barely acknowledged. I suggested couples counseling and she said we didn't need it. That every marriage had rough patches. I wanted to believe her. Looking back, I think I knew, not consciously, but somewhere deep down, I knew the woman I married had already left. Audrey watched me as I sat there in the diner, lost in my own thoughts. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "But I'm not surprised either." "That's the worst part." She nodded slowly. I felt the same way when I found out. Like I'd been holding my breath, waiting for something I already knew was coming. "How long have you and Jason been married?" 8 years. "We have a daughter." "She's 5. Her jaw tightened slightly. "That's the part that kills me. I didn't have kids with Megan. We had talked about it, but she always said the timing wasn't right. Now I understood why." "What are you going to do?" I asked. Audrey looked at me with something between mischief and resolve. "That depends on you." I raised an eyebrow. "On me?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping just slightly. "Forget her. Go out with me tonight." I blinked. "What?" She smirked. "You heard me. I should have said no. That would have been the rational thing to do, the responsible thing. I should have gone home, confronted Megan, demanded answers. I should have called a lawyer, started thinking about next steps, processed the betrayal like a reasonable adult. Instead, I said yes. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe it was the anger that hadn't quite surfaced yet. Maybe it was the way Audrey looked at me like I was worth looking at. Something Megan hadn't done in a long time. "Yes," I said. "Why not?" Audrey's smirk softened into something closer to a real smile. "Good. Meet me at the Velvet Room on Lammer Street." 8 o'clock. She stood up, dropped a $10 bill on the table for my coffee, and walked out of the diner without looking back. I sat there for another 20 minutes staring at the empty seat across from me. When I finally left, I didn't go to work. I called in sick, something I almost never did. I drove around the city for hours thinking about Megan, about our marriage, about all the times I had felt something was wrong and convinced myself I was imagining it. By the time I got home, Megan had already left for the day. Her car was gone and the house was quiet. I walked through the rooms like a stranger, looking at photos on the walls, at the furniture we had picked out together, at the life we had built. It all felt hollow now. I found myself in the bedroom standing in front of her closet. I didn't know what I was looking for. Evidence, maybe. Something that would confirm what Audrey had told me or prove it was all a mistake. I found it in a shoebox on the top shelf. Receipts from hotels I had never been to. A card with a handwritten note that said, "Counting the days until I see you again." No signature, just the initial J. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the card for a long time, 4 months, maybe longer. All those nights I thought she was working late. All those weekends she said she had to travel for a conference. All those times she told me I was being paranoid when I asked if everything was okay. Lies. Every single one. I put the card back in the box. I put the box back on the shelf. And I got ready for my date with Audrey. I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me. I thought I would feel something, some sense of betrayal to my own vows, but my vows had already been broken. Not by me. At 7:30, I got in my car and drove downtown. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. I found parking a block from the Velvet Room and walked the rest of the way. Audrey was already waiting outside and she looked like the beginning of something new. The Velvet Room was a cocktail bar with dim lighting and jazz playing softly in the background. Audrey had chosen a booth in the back corner away from the crowd. She had changed since the diner. Now she wore a black dress that showed she had put thought into this evening. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders. "You came," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought there was a chance you'd go home and do the noble thing. Confront your wife, have the hard conversation." She raised her glass slightly. "I'm glad you didn't." A waiter came by and I ordered a whiskey neat. When it arrived, I took a long sip and let the warmth settle in my chest. "So, what is this?" I asked. "Revenge?" Audrey considered the question. "Maybe partly, but I've been thinking about it all day, and I don't think that's the whole story." She traced a finger around the rim of her glass. "I think I just wanted to feel something real, something that wasn't pretending." I understood that more than she knew. "How long have you known about Jason?" 3 weeks. I hired a private investigator after I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. Hotel room one night paid in cash. He said it was a business expense that got misfiled. She laughed quietly. I wanted to believe him, but I didn't. "And you've been sitting on it this whole time." I had to figure out what I wanted to do. Screaming at him felt pointless. Filing for divorce without a plan felt reckless. So, I waited, gathered information, and then I found out about you. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I watched you for a couple of days before I approached you. You seemed like a decent guy, someone who didn't deserve what was happening to him. You could have just sent me an anonymous message." "I could have." She shrugged. "But where's the fun in that?" Despite everything, I laughed. It felt strange to laugh given what I had learned that morning, but it also felt good, like pressure releasing from somewhere deep inside. We talked for hours about our marriages, about how we had each ended up here, about all the small compromises and quiet disappointments that had accumulated over the years. Audrey was sharp and funny and didn't sugarcoat anything. She had a 5-year-old daughter named Ellie who was staying with Audrey's mother for the night. "She's the reason I haven't left yet," Audrey admitted. "I keep telling myself I need to have everything in order first. The finances, the custody arrangement, a place to live. But honestly, I think I've just been scared." "Scared of what?" "Of being alone, of failing, of admitting that I wasted 8 years on someone who didn't love me the way I thought he did." I nodded slowly. "I get that." She reached across the table and touched my hand, just briefly, but it was the first time someone had touched me with intention in months. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who wastes time," she said. "I'm not sure what kind of guy I am anymore." "Maybe that's the point." She smiled. "Maybe tonight we get to figure it out." The waiter came by with the check. Audrey paid before I could reach for my wallet. I didn't argue. We left the bar around 11 o'clock and walked through the streets of downtown Denver. The air was cool and the city had that late-night quiet that made everything feel more intimate. We passed closed storefronts and glowing restaurant windows, talking about nothing in particular and everything at once. At some point, I realized I hadn't thought about Megan in over an hour. That felt significant. "Can I ask you something?" Audrey said. "Sure. When did you stop being happy?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to give her something honest, not just the first thing that came to mind. "I don't think it was one moment," I said finally. "It was gradual, like the temperature dropping so slowly you don't notice until you're freezing." She nodded. "That's exactly what it was like for me, too. Jason and I used to be good together. Or at least I thought we were. But somewhere along the way, I became more of a convenience than a partner. Someone to watch Ellie while he worked late. Someone to manage the house while he traveled, someone to be there when he needed something, and invisible when he didn't. Did you ever confront him about it? Once about a year ago, I told him I felt neglected, that I needed more from him. He apologized, promised to do better, and things improved for maybe a month. Then it went right back to how it was. She paused. I think that was worse than if he had just stayed distant. The hope followed by the disappointment. It wore me down. I thought about all the times I had tried with Megan. The dates she canceled. The conversations she cut short. The way she always seemed to have somewhere else to be. I keep asking myself what I did wrong, I said, what I could have done differently. Audrey stopped walking and turned to face me. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did I. They made choices. Bad ones, and we're the ones left dealing with the consequences. She was right. I knew she was right, but it was hard to let go of the guilt. Anyway, I'm done being sad about it. Not as a question, as a fact I was finally accepting out loud. Mine, too. We stood there on the sidewalk. Two strangers who had become something else in the span of a single day. The city hummed around us, indifferent to our small heartbreaks. What now? I asked. Audrey smiled. Now we stop being sad about people who don't deserve our sadness. She took my hand and started walking again. We ended up at a late-night diner near Union Station, not unlike the one where we had met that morning, but different enough that it felt like a fresh start. We ordered coffee and pie and sat across from each other in a vinyl booth. You know what I like about you? Audrey said. What? You haven't tried to fix anything. You haven't told me it's going to be okay or that I should forgive Jason or any of that nonsense. You just listened. Listening seemed like the right move. It was. She took a bite of her pie. Most men don't know how to do that. I thought about what she said, about what kind of man I wanted to be going forward. Not the kind who ignored problems until they exploded. Not the kind who stayed in a broken situation out of fear. Someone better. Someone who paid attention. We stayed at the diner until almost 2 a.m. The conversation never lagged. We talked about our childhoods, our dreams, the things we had given up, and the things we still wanted. Audrey grew up in Fort Collins, moved to Denver for college, and never left. She worked as an interior designer for a firm downtown and loved her job even when the hours were brutal. Ellie is my whole world. She said, whatever happens with Jason, I need to make sure she's okay. You will? I said. That's obvious just from hearing you talk about her. She smiled at that and something in her expression softened. By the time we left the diner, the streets were empty. I walked her to her car, parked a few blocks away. We stood there in the yellow glow of a street light, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. This was unexpected, Audrey said. Which part? All of it. She laughed. I went into this morning planning to blow up your life and mine. I didn't expect to actually like you. I didn't expect to like you either. She stepped closer. So, what do we do about that? I looked at her. This woman I had known for less than 24 hours who had turned everything upside down. She was beautiful and complicated and carried her own wounds. But there was something alive in her that Megan had lost years ago. I think we see where this goes, I said. She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. She kissed me then, soft and deliberate. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Call me tomorrow, she said. After you deal with things at home. I will. She got in her car and drove away. I stood there for a while, watching her taillights disappear around a corner. Then I walked back to my own car and drove home through the empty streets. Megan was asleep when I got there. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and looked at her for a long time. The woman I had married, the woman I had loved, the woman who had chosen someone else. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. The next morning, I told her I knew. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just laid out the facts and watched her face go pale. Gabriel, I can explain. Don't, I said. I don't need an explanation. I need a divorce. She tried to argue. She cried. She said it was a mistake. That it meant nothing. That she still loved me. But I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I packed a bag, called a lawyer my coworker had recommended and left. I stayed in a hotel that first week. It was small and impersonal, but it was mine. No pretending. No waiting for someone who had already left. Audrey and I met for coffee 3 days after that first night. Then dinner, then a walk through City Park on a Sunday afternoon, while Ellie chased pigeons and laughed like only children can. I wasn't rushing anything, neither was she. But something was building between us, slow and steady, like a house being constructed on solid ground. Thank you, I told her one evening as we sat on her back porch watching the sunset. For what? For telling me the truth when you could have stayed silent. She leaned her head against my shoulder. You deserved the truth. We both did. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Megan fought it at first, then stopped when her lawyer told her she didn't have a leg to stand on. The evidence of her affair was clear, and she knew it. I saw her one last time at the courthouse after the judge signed the papers. She looked tired, thinner than before. The confidence I used to admire had been replaced by something hollow. I hope you're happy with her, she said. The words were bitter, but her voice was flat. I am. She flinched. I think she expected me to fall apart when she left, to beg her to come back, to prove that she still had power over me. But I had moved on, and that truth hit her harder than any argument ever could. Jason didn't fare much better. Audrey filed for divorce the same week I filed mine. He tried to reconcile, showed up at her door with flowers and apologies, but she had already made her decision. The custody arrangement gave her primary care of Ellie and Jason got weekends. I heard later that his reputation at work suffered after word got out about the affair. Denver wasn't a small town, but certain circles talked. He lost a promotion he had been counting on. His friends stopped inviting him to things. The life he thought he had was crumbling around him. Megan's situation was similar. The marketing firm she worked for had a strict policy about workplace conduct. And apparently Jason wasn't the only coworker she had gotten involved with. When the pattern emerged, her position became untenable. She resigned before they could fire her. They had both gambled on never getting caught. They lost. A year after that morning in the diner, Audrey and I moved in together. A small house in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard for Ellie to play in. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Some nights we would sit on the porch after Ellie went to bed, talking about everything and nothing. Other nights, we didn't talk at all. We just sat together, comfortable in the silence. I thought about how different my life had become. A year ago, I was trapped in a marriage that had already ended, just too afraid to admit it. Now I had someone who saw me, who chose me, who made me feel like I mattered. Ellie started calling me Gabe. Then a few months later, she asked if I could be her other dad. I looked at Audrey and she nodded with tears in her eyes. Yeah, I said to Ellie. I'd like that. Work was good. I had gotten the promotion I had been passed over for before, and the extra responsibility suited me. I was building something, not just at the office, but in my life. One evening, Audrey found me standing at the kitchen window, watching the sunset paint the mountains orange and pink. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just how strange life is. How the worst day of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me." She wrapped her arms around me from behind. "Sometimes the door you didn't want to open is the one that leads you home." I turned and kissed her. And in that moment, everything felt exactly as it should. I had spent years trying to hold on to something that was already gone. The day I let go was the day I finally started to live. Stay connected for further videos and subscribe this channel.